All right, I'm gonna wear my glasses because I look smart. Alelo.
Anelo, no smart over here.
No
That's why
habla.
I took my glasses off so people don't think I'm smart because I'm not. I don't want that
You are very
responsibility.
smart. You're very smart.
You're not fooling anybody.
Yeah.
Oh no. When people give you the responsibility of being smart, they give you the responsibility of answering questions and things like that.
I
And
love
hey,
You just
here
got to
we
mess up a few questions real bad every now and then they stop expecting that out of you.
go.
it.
Yeah, that's why I just answer question with "Thank you for the question," and then I just don't
Yeah.
answer it.
Yes, here we go, Mr. Johnson.
So we are here to talk about Stop the Hate. The good thing is it's a funded campaign, right? But we don't have to talk about anybody else. We are Pacific Islanders on here tonight to talk to Pacific Islanders.
Right.
So although the funding is for AA and NHPI slash I don't know. I don't know that. Nat
Asian
knows
American and sign NH/Pacific Islanders. What?
Naki's got the vernacular. She knows how it's supposed to go. What I
Yeah.
do know is we don't have to talk about anybody but us and our communities. And hate, I think hate takes a whole bunch of different forms, and we're probably
Right.
going to, dabble in a little bit of everything because we have the beautiful Miss Dacia with us tonight, coming to us from Texas, from Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas.
You,
Cloudy Houston, Texas. Where I miss my people because there isn't a bunch of PIs out here. But if you guys are watching and you're out here, give me a ring.
I'll let you, girl.
I'll let your girls so we could do some things out here.
did you have
But yeah,
were you part of that ice thing? Did the ice storms out there in Texas, or are you right on the Gulf and didn't
that
experience
was in Dallas. So Dallas experienced like little pebbles of ice coming out the sky, and then the streets freezing over, and then
that?
them not taking their brain cells and rubbing it together to think, oh, maybe I shouldn't drive on the road today. So we had a lot of cars trying to drive up on a
Yeah,
ramp, end up sliding back on the ramp. So
but
yeah, they shut down. They
our
shut down
girl in
for a couple of
Houston,
days.
you didn't have to deal with any of that.
Just the wind and the rain, but we're thankful.
Aw.
We don't need that kind of karma over here in Houston.
And Miss Naki, how's the weather in Fairfield? Long as we're making the
Oh my
meteorology.
God. I don't know if well, it's beautiful outside. I'm just warm because I'm old. It's probably menopause or whatever. So
You got
otherwise
that
I'm
self
good.
heat.
It's like that's a whole different show.
That's a much needed show.
That's a yes. That's a
Yes.
much needed show.
We'll put
I
that
don't
in the lineup.
Yeah.
So I think, from a Stop the Hate campaign, and let's just toss this around. I don't like the name of it because I feel like, and it might be my age, I
Right.
feel like hate brings on this, like it would have to be like a cross burning in your yard, or you know what I mean? Like to me, if I hear hate, I'm thinking like it's got to be something just wild and over the
Aggressive.
top. When
Yeah.
actually, it can take so many different forms less than that. And I don't know if that's just my own personal feeling. Like when I think hate, I don't necessarily think about things that I should, like comments that I hear or, discriminate outcomes or those kind of things. It's much more subtle than, in my mind. It's something worse. So let's kick that around. What do we think of when we hear the term, hate or stop the hate? We'll start in Houston.
I think of both. So I think of hate as this like huge looming cloud over our day. Like the weather, it could affect how we go out, it affects where we go, it could affect our job, like, just how weather affects whether we go out or how we behave, right? Or it could just be like those little things that we say, like, stop being a hater. We say that to people who have little attitudes or just sly comments or they're just annoying in general. We'd be like, just stop being a hater. So I think of both of them. It is a spectrum. So it could range from, hey, hush your mouth to, no, we need to call somebody. Something needs to be done. This is serious.
Yeah.
So I just stop the hate. I like the phrase stop the hate because it gives me kind of hope that I have the responsibility that I could bond with people to actually stop spreading the hate around. And and make sure that other people don't experience hate for who they are or
Yeah.
what they do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think hate comes in all different kinds, different forms of whether it's racism or ignorance or um, people not knowing because they're ignorant of what they say to me personally, what they say to me, um, or show me. But sometimes it's just that little poke that people do that is just as bad as if they are burning a cross on my front yard. Because depending on what you say, I like, not that I like Stop the Hate, but it means so many things. It
Mm.
means so many things, whether it's discrimination or like I said, racism or, just being ignorant to different people, whether it's color, whether it's, lack of education or more of education or I don't know. It's a wide variety of things. And I think it shocks me still to this day that, like we're PIs and the way we talk to one another sometimes is like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Like I've heard so many, and a lot of racial terms, right? The old school. And we just, we tell our elders or whoever don't necessarily have to be an elder, but I, I see now that we're trying to correct the elders. They're like, and it's not even me. It's like my kids are correcting
Right.
people, not because to me, we Carl and I had this conversation where when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, old ass. When people said the N word to us, it was like terms of endearment. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And how, as crazy as that sounds, I know better now, but when people would say it to me and we'd hug and kiss, and back then back then it was terms of endearment. Now, when you say it, because we know better,
You're right.
but we didn't know any better back then, right? We didn't know any better. And I think back then, and I told Carl this earlier, we were just trying to survive, trying to, like, I'm the first generation to be born in my family here in the States. And so my parents were busy trying to get a job, keep a roof over our head, and education was not a thing for us, so I was just going to school. Then my next move was to get a job to help my parents pay the bills. So we were trying to fit in where we can get in, So, oh, is that how we said? Okay, then that's what we're gonna say. But as I'm older, I realize that that was an it's an ignorant word to say, and I should never say it. But I catch myself slipping sometimes because of my age and the people that I hang out when I see my old friends. And then, we're like, okay, we should not be talking this way. And so it's an ongoing conversation, which I love, instead of whoever is saying it to me or I'm saying it, or I shouldn't be saying it, but whoever is talking to me, we have the conversation, man. We shouldn't, we shouldn't say that. Where before we would just carry on like it's normal, right?
Hmm.
Now we actually stop to have the conversation and try to understand where it came from.
I'd
When,
love to get Dacia's thought on this because the N word. So let's talk about words a little bit.
yeah,
Um, there is a point of empowerment, right? You're disempowering the word from a word being used against me. Well, then, like, you hear women will refer to themselves, like, I'm not the bitch you want to do that. I'm not that bitch or something like that, right?
Mm.
So
Period.
you're disempowering that word, right? So when
Yeah.
in the use of words, but is there a point that it goes too far where it's either not being used in a disempowerment sense, or is there a time where that's no longer needed? Like you don't need to disempower the word anymore, and it's kind of evolution to where look, we can go beyond um, beyond that. But I wanted to every time I listen to Dacia talk, and Naki and I have talked about this, we learn something, right? We learn a new point of view, learn a different way to look at things. So I really wanted to, I've always understood that. The word queer when I was growing up was a horror, like that was a
Terrible word. I even remember that. Like
yeah,
it
like
was a
that was
terrible
like,
word.
and I heard, young people start referring to themselves as queer, and I was like, whoa, now it has done that for me. I don't like, blink and kind of what? when I hear it anymore. So they have taken that word back, right? That word has been removed from the, you know, but is there a point where we move past that, or kind of talk about your feelings of the words and disempowerment, and is it evolution where we move beyond that, or how do you feel about that?
For me, it's never going to be something that's going to be resolved
Mm,
because there's no consensus amongst any group. So even amongst Black groups, it's just like some people say, "Hey, I have the freedom to use it. I've been oppressed by it. I own it, and I'll use it." And another group will say, "Well, why bring that? That was a word placed upon us to disenfranchise us, to oppress us. So why keep using it?" But I understand the conversation. When it comes to PIs, I don't think they understand that, like, yes, you could go into a community, you could assimilate and survive. That's important because a lot of PIs that use the N word will say, "Oh, well, I grew up here, I grew up
mm,
there. And so, this is just how my friends talk. This is how my friends talk." And, nobody bats an eye about it. But the
right,
problem is when you travel outside of your friends group,
right,
people will not understand or accept you the
right,
way your friend groups do. And
right,
that's why I say your Black card, travel without it
right,
because it will be declined in other communities.
right.
Uh, the when you say the N word in California and you come down to Texas or you go on to North Carolina, if you go into any other part of the world, you might experience some pushback because they don't recognize you as being part of the group that is oppressed by that word. Even though Samoans, well, if you go back to like New Zealand and Samoa, that word was used then to describe our people. That word was used to kind of blackbird us as well. So we have a history with that. But that's just it. That word is history for PIs. For the Black community, it's still a word used to oppress them today. There hasn't been a break in terms of like, oh, we went decades without using that word, or we
Yeah,
haven't experienced any discrimination for decades or centuries. So we're not going to take that word kind of to harm. But it's something that's still used today. It's an ongoing cycle. We still have to talk about white supremacy. We still have to talk about systematic oppression. We still have to talk about being disenfranchised in terms of food deserts, education, interactions with the police. So having other groups use that word, especially when interacting with Black people, it's a huge contention because PIs are now marrying into the Black culture, are now dating into the Black culture. And sometimes they have to check their hate and check their privilege when they come into these groups. I can't tell you how many, like, and specifically Samoan girls, because I know you. And if you have a problem with that, hit me up. This is my social down there. When they get with someone in the Black community, whether it be a man or a woman, they come into these Black groups, and because they have the long hair and they're lighter skin, there is a kind of privilege they walk into. You're deemed as like aesthetically pleasing, and then especially if you're a shapely girl, you kind of have the aesthetics of your Black brothers and sisters. Then let's just call it our PI community and our Black community are, we're cousins or
yeah,
brothers and sisters, like.
right,
And so we bring some of our anti-Blackness into that community. And then on top of that, you want to say the N word. It's just, it's a mess.
right,
And I say, and to avoid the mess, then just don't tip over cups. Like, what is the purpose of that word? You don't use it on a job application. You
mm,
barely use it at work. You wouldn't say it in front of your boss. You probably wouldn't even say it at church. And so, what is the purpose of the word in your life? If it really is enriching, then why do you get mad when somebody calls you that? You know what I'm saying? If it's something that is just positive and everyone is really cool with it, why
yeah,
would you get mad if somebody called your mother or your grandmother or your grandpa that? So
right,
you have to kind of gauge your reactions to words by how it would feel if it was said to you or to your family. We don't think about anti-Blackness or racism until it happens to us, and it's very reactionary.
right,
But if you're going to have these beautiful babies and make these beautiful families, you now have to be kind of the troubleshooter of your family. You
right,
now have to be the guide of your family. And so you kind of have to purge those behaviors. So, like, I love how Naki was like, hey, sometimes I slip up, but we have the conversation. So it's not, I used to be a very angry person and tell people, like, why are you saying the word? You don't even know. Have you read the 400-page book on slavery and what this was done? Now it's just like, okay, do I want to rage at you, or do I want to have a conversation so you can see my perspective? And our social media has shifted. I hope it's shifting from the rage to the conversation. Um,
Yes.
I'm not going to be nice to you if you're being ignorant, but you know, I can understand if someone says the N word to me and they're not being malicious. That really is their cadence and how they're talking. Then I'll just be like, hey, next time.
I know.
I prefer not to be called that. And then they'll ask why. Well, to me, this is what happens. To
Right.
me, this is what it sounds like. And then when they understand and you form that relationship and they understand, oh, I'm hurting this person I like. I'm hurting my friend. Then even if they just edit themselves around me, that's a win
Yeah.
because I'm making you a little bit more conscious, right? But I would say to people, if you are trying to engage someone who uses that word and you don't prefer them to use the word, ask questions. Ask questions. That's the most approachable way to start a conversation. Be like, hey, can you tell me why do you use that word? Why do you think? And then just ask them. Be like, you know, and I've started conversations like that with plenty of people, even with family members. And my family members grew up in the 90s, you know what I mean? Poly gangster culture, the brown lip liner and the dookie braids.
Oh, dang.
But they have kids now. My aunties and uncles have kids now, and they see them growing, and so we have small discussions, and they say, yeah, I know. You know, as long as we can have the conversation and I do my part, I'm good with it. But I'm encouraged by the younger generation because they're a lot more conscious. They have way more information than we did. I had to look for my information, but now they get information thrown at them. So
Yeah.
all they have to develop is filters now. They
Yeah.
have to develop the filters on whether or not the information they're receiving is correct. But as long as Carl and Naki are here and people
Lord,
like them are
don't
here,
listen to
we'll
us. Don't
guide
listen
you. We'll guide you.
I think that's a great point, though. That look, you may be comfortable, and your group may be comfortable with that language, but you got to be ready for the kickback if you find yourself not around your group and in a different group, and then now you can't filter yourself and you trip. Then hey, you got to be ready to deal with. So what is easier? Like you said, don't spill cup. Don't tip cups if you don't want to spill stuff. Then maybe
Exactly.
just take it out. Like, what's the point of using it if there's no real use of it? And
to us.
that's a great point. Like, have a conversation when, like, it's easy to snap on somebody, and I think that anger is probably an easier way for us to deal with stuff. Like, that's easy. I can do anger like right now, but
Yes.
hey, let's have a discussion. Let's talk about that. Look, that's takes a little bit more effort, a little bit more consciousness in the moment, and those kind of things. It's easier just to you know snap and say something that probably isn't going to resolve anything. But that's a great point. I always wanted to hear on that of the disempowerment piece I get, and
Mhm.
then but you're right. There isn't consensus on it, so there's no real way to say we're using it or we're not using it because
Right.
people feel differently about it.
Yeah,
I
and it's so commercialized too. It's been sold around in movies and music. Like we have Asian folks saying the N-word. We have people in Sweden saying the N-word. So it's like we've made it popular in a sense where people think nothing of it. It's like a buzzword,
right.
It's like woke. Like everybody's saying woke now. So it means nothing now. But like when you shop a word around like that, we kind of lose sight of, well, where does this word come from and who has ownership of it? Because when you establish ownership, then you can establish the rules. But when everyone feels like they have ownership of it, then they feel like, well, you can't take that word away from me. So I say, we can't stop you from saying the N word. Hey, it's your mouth, your
Right.
words. But just know that freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequences.
Yeah.
So there is power of life and death in the tongue. And if you speak death over your dreams or over your situation or over your friend group, do not be surprised when the hearse pulls up. and
Right.
wants to put you in the box. So I
Okay.
say speak life and just take it. There's other words to use, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
in other words, yeah.
There's other words to use, but I'm not gonna be the word police. Just know that around me, I'm driving the hearse. I'm just I'm try- not around me, but I make it a boundary. I make it
Yeah,
a boundary, and then I even make it a point to get around different people. I feel like if you're always in your own friend group, you don't get to see the beauty of the diversity of not even just different people outside of the South Pacific, but within the South Pacific.
yeah.
Hang with your Fijian friends, your Vanuatu friends, your Marshallese friends. Like
Mhm.
if you get around different people and see how they live and how they love, like you get to open up your world and ultimately open up your vocabulary. And
Yeah,
you'll see different problems that pop up too. Like the N word is not the biggest issue in our community. It's our own internalized racism, our anti-blackness, like
yeah.
the way we treat our darker island counterparts is crazy to me. Like I'll hear little words here and there, like, "Oh, you'd be pretty if you were lighter skin." I'm like, take a look at pictures of 60 years ago.
What?
What lighter skin? What are you talking
Mm,
about? So I've excuse me, I've just delved deeper into our history just to realize like, oh, okay, these are the ways we kind of messed up, or these are the things that are done to us, and our PI people have been so beautiful in that we've just adapted.
right,
We've just adapted to colonialism. We've adapted to environmental racism. All of these things. We're just trying to create series of adjustments so we can just live. But I think we're at a point where surviving is not enough. You know what I
right,
mean? And we need to thrive. And in order to do that, we kind of have to break down the things that don't serve us. And a lot of those things were taught to us. It's not even us innately. We didn't grow up thinking about being darker skin was ugly. We didn't go grow up thinking, oh, everybody had to have straight hair. The chemicals we used to put in our hair, babies, the relaxers, the
right.
laying on the ironing board just to get our hair straight because we're trying to reach an aesthetic. But now people are altering their bodies so they can look like us.
That's like,
So
oh, yeah,
we
that's
can,
crazy.
yeah. And we're over here hating our brown skin and our coiled hair so we can achieve an image that's not even meant for us. And yet everybody, Dr. Miami is making millions.
Millions.
Sculpting people to make them look like your Samoan mom in the kitchen making cocoa rice. It's
Yeah,
wild.
it's crazy.
I think the part of the problem, and we had talked about it. I think we were in the pre-show and we were talking about um, the Micronesians ending up in Hawaii, right? I think that's an unspoken, but it's a learned behavior, right? Colonialism groups people, right? And so, and I say parent culture because of the wage based society and capitalism. So when I say parent culture, I don't mean that that's like what we want to grow up to be.
Mhm,
But as we assimilated into that culture, we saw racism. We saw, treating minorities differently. So to treat Micronesians different when they landed in Hawaii, right? When they got to Hawaii, all of a sudden, hey, here's a group that's less powerful than even us because we've dealt with all this kind of stuff for so long.
mhm,
That's what is learned through colonialism is to, like it or not, you treat people of lesser groups, a lesser social stature, you treat them, and it's a learned behavior through colonialism. And to me, the hate and the discrimination and those kind of things, I feel like the hate or issues that we have as Pacific Islanders is more important to fix or address if I had to prioritize that, because it's like now there is a push for to be aware, to be woke,
mhm,
to be, progressive. There is a push through society of that. So it's kind of not like it's taken care of on that end, but man, when we're not treating our own brothers and sisters um, well, that to me, when I see those kind of things, it really hits a chord in me of like this. We gotta fix. Like your own house. Got to clean up your own house before you go down the neighborhood telling people to clean up their yard. Right? If your yard better be clean. If you're down the row talking to your neighbors about it. Um, how do you think that as we express ourselves within our Pacific Islander communities, even within our Samoan community or Tongans in the Tongan community, there these things exist because we've learned them through the colonialism. What's the best way or conversation starter, or how do you start to address that at home or within the communities?
For me, it's like we project such this global image of one love, right? Whenever you see Islanders get together for rugby, for like fantasy races,
We're all
anything,
one.
yeah, we're all one. Oh,
We
we're
love
supporting you. My challenge to our groups is make that true. Make it true. If it is one love, then make it true. It's very easy to get caught up in your tribalism and try to grasp onto these little slivers of power and this world where it's constructed to make it seem that we're fighting over some scarce resource. Power within the South Pacific belongs to all of us. And once we realize again that what happens to the other island will happen to you,
Mm,
you kind of have to make other people's struggle important, because when it comes time for you to go through it, they're going to come and support. That's how we do it. Like even in the Fa'alavalava, like I would get annoyed with my dad where he was like, "Oh, we need $100 here, $200 here for the cousin's dog walker's babysitter," and I'm like,
right.
why are we donating to this Fa'alavalava? We barely know these people. And he
I
says,
know. I'm with you, girl.
yeah, but he told me, he was like, but when it comes time for your time, when it's your turn, watch how your support will come back to you. Watch how they'll love you. And I'm getting teared up because because it our
It's
islands are
true.
so beautiful. You know what I mean? We have enough stress put up on us from people invading our islands and
Right,
telling us how to live, how to fish, how to
right.
pay taxes. Like we have people in Hawaii being priced out of their own homes. But what do we get when we fight amongst each other? Nothing.
Nothing.
Other people benefit off of our struggle. Other people benefit when we do not stand together. And I
Right.
say the first, like Carl said, the first act of kind of like activism begins at home.
Mm,
Break down those break down those things that you hear from your parents,
right.
and try to understand why they say that. And again, ask questions. Oh, why do you say that? Oh, what do you mean don't marry those people over there? Where does that come from? And you'll start to see the shame when they start explaining themselves. And then you're like, "Oh, okay. I got to do some reading. I
Yeah.
got to do some I got to get out there and get some resources." There's no excuse in 2023 as to you not being able to find something, some kind of information.
Resource. Yeah.
We gotta vet it out, and you gotta consult with people, but
Yeah.
you gotta read outside of the American news media. You got to. There's so much out there. And then find an island. And this is what I did a couple years back. I would find an island I didn't know much about and just read facts on them.
Great.
And then look up, what's their governmental structure like? How did they get this way? And what's their relation to my island in terms of like my Samoan people? And you'll
Right.
find that we are a lot similar than we are different. But there's
Yes.
a beauty in our diversity. But like for people to get hate in Hawaii for being Micronesian, but not people remembering that their islands were bombed
Right. Right.
because people thought, oh, here's just a random island of small people. Let's just nuke them and
Yeah.
then just relocate them. That's a crime. That's
Yeah.
a crime to our people. And I say our people because they're still radioactive in those
Right,
oceans.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
What shocked me when I started digging into that was that the bombing stopped with Clinton in office. This is not when like Eisenhower and Truman and I don't know Roosevelt were in office. Clinton was the last president that they were still testing bombs out there.
Hmm.
That's that is, and then you just realize, how much is you couldn't get away with that now. You know what I mean? Like it'd be on Twitter in a heartbeat. It would be all over. But as recent as Clinton was, what, 4 presidents ago? I mean, he wasn't. That's not Truman.
That's not
Uh,
far away at
That's
all.
right.
it.
And that was just, it really shocked me that that's how recent, this isn't ancient history, black and white TV, radio days, that this was happening. And to know that our brothers and sisters were, and not only that, but then when you learn about that, like they were told, look, we're just going away for, and we'll do the test and then you'll come back. You're never coming back.
Yeah,
You personally, because, you're in 50 years, maybe people go back there, but what they were talking about, they were going to return there like next week. And people were just, told these crazy things. And I love what you say about, pick a history that's not necessarily your own, a Pacific Island history, and just, you know, s- spend a couple hours reading about it. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be, get a doctorate in history within that culture, but just learn a little bit about the history. You're going to see the same thing. You're going to see colonialism. You're going to see capitalism. You're going to see a bunch of European nations drawing lines in the ocean, going, okay, you can have these and you get these. So yeah, I love the stuff that you're talking about. What are some of the in Texas? I always think of that like, oh man, don't mess with Texas. And but then I hear of how many Pacific Islanders live in like Euless, for example. We always talk about that. And there's the athlete connection, right? There's the athletics
yeah,
connection, but it, you're in the South, you're in Dixie, right? That was, and is, the South. There's the stereotype of the Klan and all those kind of things running around down there. Do you see do you see it? Is it much more blatant? Is it just as subtle and just as, I don't know, insidious as it is, everywhere else? Or do you see things more vividly, moving from one of the most liberal areas in the country to Texas?
yeah.
Is it different for you?
I think the state of Texas needs some work in terms of the hate experienced here. But I live in Houston, and that's a blue city, so there's a lot of diversity here. I haven't really experienced any issue. People just want to live their lives. I mean, it does help that we have a bunch of Californians over here, so it feels like California. But I give credit to Texas in terms of the major cities that I've been to. No issues. I People are just trying to get up every day and feed their kids and go to work and just trying to do life. Now, when you get into these little towns on the outskirts, that's when you have issues because again, these people don't travel. They don't travel outside of their town. They
Right.
don't experience any diversity or nothing. There's still sundown towns in
Right.
Texas. So um, I avoid that as much as possible. And then me being as much as I love being Samoan, I'm also looked at as being black because they think I'm from Somalia instead of Samoa. Like I'll
Yeah.
tell them Samoa and they'll be like, Somalia? Are you from Somalia? And I'm like, ugh. But I alter because of who I am. I alter how I move in Texas. I don't drive at night.
Yeah.
And then if I'm driving in between towns, I don't stop. Make
Yeah.
sure I stay gassed up, stop at a Bucky's and then be on our way. But like I do
Ooh,
not want to be
for people
kind of
that don't know, for people on the West Coast. So I was with my business partner. I have Texas in my area, and he said, "Hey, we're gonna go to lunch. We're on the way to so and so. We'll stop at Bucky's, grab something to eat." And I was like, "What's Bucky's?" He goes, "It's a truck stop." That's all he said. And I was like, "What are we eating at a truck stop? Are you crazy?" And then I got to Bucky's. Dacia, explain what Bucky's is.
Bucky's is like a gas station mixed with a mall
What?
with a food court. Like you could buy a t-shirt, motor oil, a latte, and like roast beef in one spot. It is kind of like a central train station too. People come in and out. I think there are thousands of people that come through there like every other hour because there's so many people. But it is definitely an experience. I used to call it Busey's, but they were like Bucky's. Don't say Busey's to nobody. But it's a popular spot out here, and it's kind of a safe haven too because it's a trucking state, so
Uh,
trucks get to park and have a place to like walk in and buy food. And they don't have to go through fast food, drive-throughs. The heck they have to go through that kind of hell every time they truck through. But Bucky's is well lit. They even pay their workers like a good wage. I said, dang, $24 to be a manager. I might
That's nice.
okay, let me come work at Bucky's.
It's
But
like
they
you think
pay
of a rest area in California, but with a strip mall, like a miniature mall there, and a like an actual park area. It's a
yeah.
truck stop, so you have like these huge 18-wheelers rolling in there to get gas. They have showers, like legit showers and things for the, truckers want to get a shower and a meal and those kind of things, but it's clean, it's
It's
bright.
mean.
Yeah, you think truck stop in California, it does not even in the same universe of that. Anyway, you said Bucky's. I was like, there's a lot of people who don't know what Bucky's is. So continue on. I get that, right? There's still dry counties in Texas. There's
Yeah,
still
I
down
just
cities.
I avoid certain things. Like if I have a fear that I might get pulled over by police or whatever, I just don't travel at odd hours of the night. I make sure to stay in well lit areas. I'll make sure my sister knows where I am. Like it sucks, but those are the precautions that I use because I don't know anybody out here, so I don't know what bad areas are and what good areas are. I just know I need to get home, be home at a certain time. I thank God I work from home too, so I don't have to travel out here because gun ownership is high out here, and so you could be shot over a fender bender because the other person couldn't control their temper. Like it
Right.
happens a lot out here. So gun violence is huge, and I don't own one. But I've been told several times to own one, which is kind of concerning to me because, yeah, I mean, I don't know. When I think someone's, I don't think guns.
Yeah.
Maybe a machete, maybe a slap to the face, but not
Mm,
a gun.
yeah.
And so I want to, yeah, I want to not promote gun violence, but I don't want to be stupid either. So
Right.
that's a
Right.
conversation I have to have within myself because even gun ownership leads to hate. It's weird, but
Yeah.
it does. Like access to guns or who gets to use a gun and who doesn't. I know if I used a gun to defend myself, I would have to defend myself in court. Probably get the best lawyer around. But if somebody else who may be white will use their gun to defend themselves, they're automatically believed. Like, oh,
Right.
they were just protecting their land or protecting their home. And so the NRA will stand up for one person, but won't stand up for the person who was illegally searched and was gunned down because they thought a cell phone was a gun. Like
Right.
I just see that out in the
All
world, and it
that.
just
Yeah.
scares me. Like,
Yeah.
how can you make defending yourself a racial issue? I don't understand that, But
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 and yet
Texas,
in this country it is.
yeah, but
Yeah.
Texas is not that bad, folks. I mean, get to the blue areas
Yeah.
Yeah, I
and
forget
and
that
you'll be all right.
Houston's a city of 2 million people. So any city with 2 million people's got diversity in it, right? It doesn't matter where that city's in. I don't know, North Dakota, they don't have one, right? But that's the point. There's the Houston's got 2 million people in it. You think about San Francisco's got like, I don't know, 800,000. Like Houston's huge.
That's a lot, and especially with COVID, people migrated here, so it's getting
Yeah.
bigger every day. Um, but how do you guys deal with? I know people like to think, well, California's liberal, and there's no hate here, but I think there's some instances where California does experience a lot of those secluded towns.
Yeah. And I think most of the well, not I don't think San Francisco no, the San Francisco is so diverse that I would think there isn't any. But I'm sure there's little pockets like we talked about, and totally. And I now that I think about it, I was like, am I being lazy? We had gone to a family event. We talked about this on Sunday that we went somewhere and we were the only and I think we were the only someones at this event, and we sat at a table.
Mm,
And the rest of the room, the people were white and very nice. Everyone was really nice. And a girl came over and we took this as her trying to connect with us really quick. At least that's how I took it. We were talking. Everybody's in their conversation, and she's talking to me. Oh, nice to meet you. And out of nowhere, she hit me with, "Have you seen the movie Moana?" And I was like, "Oh boy." in my head, I was like, man, this is, and it was my cousins that were sitting at the table. They were like quick
We
to,
all we all turned and faced the wall and had our
yeah,
own conversations and left Naki all alone with that
yeah,
lady.
they left me like crickets. And to me, I was like, I get that you're trying to connect with me. And is this the place where I'm going to school you? Like, no. And
This setting was not it
it was, we were at a funeral. We were at a funeral. And I was like, and it's obvious that we're the only brown people in the room. And so I'm like, okay, I get you're trying to connect with me. I get it, but it's so ignorant,
Yeah.
right? It's like, is this the place I'm going to school you? Like, no, this is not. And it's not my job, right? It's like, it's not my job to teach you that this
Mm,
is, and I get you don't have any experience with Pacific Islanders. Otherwise, you wouldn't have came at me that way, right? And just, we were at a funeral. So yes, one, it was not the place to go off on her. I get you're trying to connect with me. Two, very ignorant. But you just didn't know. Like she did not know. She honestly did not know how to connect. I get you're trying to. It's not my job to totally, it's not my job to teach. There's a time and place that was not it.
Yeah, it was like she
And
came
that's
over
not it.
definitely putting herself out there. You know what I
Right.
wow.
mean?
Right. She
She
came
sat
over.
down at the table, wanted to try to make us feel included in the whole room. I'm probably is what I'm thinking. And so she was, and I thought about this too. I was like, at least there is a movie that talks a little bit about our culture or stories or, legends that
And
she
again,
has to
you
refer
connected
to.
us
So
with that. You
there was
connected.
pieces that were like, yay, but at the same time, like, I don't
Yeah.
know, let that happen organically. Say that 20 minutes in after you've been sitting there and you're having some conversation and there's a way for that to come up. But yeah, that was one of those where it was like,
Yeah.
well intentioned, but it took a lot of patience by everybody to, really see what was happening there and go, she's not, coming at us like and trying to make fun of it,
Right.
but it was an awkward moment.
It
We
was
all
very
were poor
awkward.
Mackie there by herself.
Right. And then I think again, like, I mean, was I being lazy? You know what I mean? Like, should I have schooled her so that she knows? Because the next PI that she says that to, you might just get it, right? And so I used to work in another office with another Samoan lady, and this guy who knew it was just our office. And for some reason, two Samoan ladies are in this office. And he would walk by and go, Samoa, not Samoa. He would go, Samoa. And we would just, haha, haha, hey, how you doing? Haha. And it was like, in my head, I was like, man, he's an idiot. But I didn't care, right? And another girl who's not a Pacific Islander, who was younger than me, she's like, aren't you offended by that? That's offensive. Should we say something to him? And I don't know if it was my Nate. Like, should I be mad? Should I have been mad? I didn't even take it that way. You know what I mean? Like, am I that ignorant that somebody is walking by saying this and it's not offensive to me? And again, he was just, maybe I should have said something, but I wasn't offended. Like I should, now that I think about it, maybe I should have been. But it's funny that it was a younger generation, and she wasn't even PI, but she was like, "I'm offended by that. You should say something. Aren't you offended by that?" And of course, me and the other Samoan girl were like just laughing it off. Like, and I think our nature, we don't realize when it's offensive, right? We didn't
Yeah.
realize at the time. Damn, should I have said something? When is it, because do you think because we're so PIs are so humble and ha ha ha, we just laugh everything off? But again, it gets to the,
Do
I'm
you
not.
think Naki, do you think it could be because you felt like he was just trying to like connect
Uh-huh.
and interact with you so you didn't take it that way? Or
But again, the next person he does that to, he may not get the same response. Like, oh, if I say this to that one Samoan girl, I could say it to another. Like, I
true.
just think there's a time and a place, and he wasn't being mean. At least I don't think so. He wasn't being mean. He just does it when he walks. I don't know. I don't know,
It's
but when is it the time? Right. Like if he was being mean to me, I would know, right? I would be, come back in here,
ah,
No, that's not
I'll
my
give
place
you a
to
cookie
do this.
slam.
Right. Right. Let me sit down. Let me school you. I'm at my place of business. I'm trying to hold on to my money. Um, but I feel like there's a time and place again, that was not the time and place. Had it been outside and I was offended by it, I think if I was offended by it, I would have said something. I just
Yeah,
would.
I think that's a great example of like owning your offense. Like I, when I'm offended, I'll say something.
Right.
But there's a culture of people who aren't being discriminated against being offended
Right.
for the group that's being discriminated against or looks like they're being discriminated
Right.
against. And I'm just like, you get your own problems. Worry
Right.
about that
Right.
in that sense, because it's
Right.
like if it's not a problem and it's just people saying Samoa, like there's nothing, I don't find anything innately wrong about that. Now, if that same person was keeping you at a certain position in your job
Right.
and you never got promoted or you were treated a certain way because you were Samoan, then
Yeah,
that's different.
that's
But
different.
just because people don't go read or have anything else to say other than saying Samoa,
Yeah.
they're not being malicious.
And
Like,
kind of think of it, he was let go not too long after.
there you have it.
Maybe she did say something, so I don't know. I
It was
mean, I
funny when Naki told me that story. She goes, "Yeah," and he'd walk by and go, "Samoa," and I go, "Wow, was he Samoan or Pacific Islander?" She goes, "No." I go, "Did he actually say Samoa or did he say Samoa?" And she goes, "No, no, no. He said Samoa. Like he didn't say Samoa." I was like, "Well, he's actually saying like he's making the effort to say
right.
Samoa correctly." And she's like,
Yeah.
"No, no, that's not
But
it."
is it crazy? It's crazy to when I think about it, it's crazy for them to even because we wouldn't go up to, Latinx community and say, you know what I mean? And say something,
Mexico.
Puerto
right?
Rico.
Because we know better. For people that are outside of our community or just don't know how to interact with us, it's crazy to me that they don't know that's not right, right? And so maybe I should have said something just to teach them or to tell them that, hey man, you can't do that. You can't do that to everybody, right?
Yeah. I
Me,
mean,
I'm good. I don't, it shouldn't
again,
bother me.
again, it would be you just ask them a question. Hey, how come you always say
Why do you
Samoa
say
when
that? Right,
you
right.
see us? And then they'll have to explain themselves, you know?
Yeah,
But I think we in this conversation about stopping the hate, we do have to recognize there is a cultural exchange that
yeah,
happens every day. And
yeah.
there's a difference between cultural exchange and just being offensive, right?
Right,
There I have a friend group that's Latinx and they'll call me Selena
right.
because I love to sing Selena songs.
Uh-huh.
And like they'll just say Selena, but somebody outside of our friend group would be like, "Why are you calling this non
Yeah.
Latin American person, Selena?" And I'm offended by that. But we were just having cultural exchange. And you'll see on TikTok, you have Black folks singing Samoan and Hawaiian and
And they
Tongan
do it
songs.
so
And
well.
they're so beautiful. And I'm not even offended by I'm just like,
Right.
do it again. What's the next song? Next
Yeah,
song.
learn another
It's like
song, learn another song.
start something. And you also see our folks in the South Pacific. We pick up art forms from other people as long as we give credit to where we get it from and we do it with excellence and we do it with pride.
Right.
That's the cultural exchange that we need to have.
Yes,
But
yes,
I think because certain cultures get taken from a lot, it's an unequal exchange, and
right.
someone feels like they're
Right,
not getting the
right.
best of the deal. And
Yeah,
so when you feel like your culture, your language, your style, your music, all of that's being borrowed from people outside of your culture, you start feeling taken advantage of.
right.
And so that those are the things that we kind of have to look for or look out for, even amongst ourselves. Like I feel like sometimes the Hawaiian culture kind of dominates the conversation when it comes to South Pacific because that's what most people know. Like when
Yeah,
I tell them, "Oh, I'm Samoan," they'll be like, "Oh, you're from Hawaii." I'm like, "No, we're not from there."
yeah,
But I love my cousins from Hawaii, but sometimes our conversation is eclipsed by, because everybody knows where Hawaii is.
yeah,
And then again, you have people from Tonga and Samoa, they kind of take over the conversation when we talk about other islands because they know us from football or sports or
yeah,
social media because we're so
yeah,
out there. Some people in the Micronesians or Melanesian islands who aren't as outspoken might feel like, well, the Polynesians are just dominating conversation and they're only talking about them, but there are things happening with us. And that's a different type of hate too. When
Right.
we're blind or deaf to the struggles of our own people, that's a type of insidious hate, actually. It's the silence that keeps things going the way it does.
Right.
Like the fact that West Papua is being
Still.
invaded and having things occurring on their island in our waters,
Right.
and yet we haven't banded together and said, hey, this needs to stop. It is crazy, because that it can easily be us
Right.
when other countries get antsy and they start looking at our resources and start looking at our islands. We have to be able to lean on each other and fight for each other and with each other when it comes to certain things. And that's not just relegated to our islands. That's in our classrooms. When you notice that, like, hey, PI kids are being treated a certain way, or they need something and they're not being provided for, we need to speak up on that, because nothing changes if nothing changes.
Right.
Nothing. We like to be quiet because it's our collectivistic personality, right? We don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
We just want to do what our elders say. But I challenge folks to challenge folks.
Right.
If we want better, we have to speak out. And that's why I love the FICA podcast, because you guys bring to light things that we need to pay attention to, especially when it comes to like COVID, when we weren't doing what we need to do, washing our hands and wearing our mask and paying attention to the deaths that were happening to our community, because them not having our stats or us not reporting our stats too just made it worse. It made it
Worse.
worse because they didn't see anything with that. And then when we started dying off, look at how racism behaved towards us. They said, oh, well, if those people would just stop eating themselves to death, they have diabetes, they're overweight. They didn't care that this disease was killing all of us. They
Right.
found blame within our community and encouraged apathy. Oh, don't pay attention to those islanders. They already don't care about their health.
Right.
When really, y'all invaded our islands and introduced sugars and all that stuff into our
Yeah.
diet.
Right.
and wages and things like that. Now we have to work to buy all of this artificial food instead of living off the land and making it profitable to be a farmer or fisherman and things like that. Our population adapted, and yes, we do have issues with sugar and things like that. But every society that's being colonized has issues with that: sugar, alcohol, and food. But
Yes.
when COVID hit, it broke my heart to see how people from outside of the South Pacific or outside of Pacific Islanders looked at our population dying and said, well, they deserve that because they're already a big people. Look at their obesity charts. Obesity charts. Now that's what we're looking at
Right.
when it comes to a pandemic that was killing everyone
Everybody.
equally.
Right.
I'm on a message board, and I was getting like heated debates on the message board about. I was like, so you were saying because like Pacific Islanders going to die anyway because and they were like, yeah. I was like, well, we're all going to die. So if that's the bar, that because that they're going to die anyway, we all die. So if somebody gets murdered, well, they're just human. They're going to die anyway. They're not going to live forever. Like nobody thinks about that. It's like with when people would say that about people with AIDS. Well, they had AIDS. They were going to die anyway. No, we're all
Right.
going to die. Like that's not a special thing that we're all mortal. So that drove me completely. It's like if I had, I don't know, if I have cancer, right? So if somebody shoots me, you don't say, ah, well, he had
He's
cancer.
gonna die
They're
anyway.
gonna die anyway. Like that's the silliest. But it comes down to blame the victim. Like
Right.
if you're poor, it's your fault. If you're, I don't know, if you're overweight, it's your fault. Like all those kind of things. And the whole overweight thing is the obesity pandemic hit in the late 70s, early 80s. So there's been a food surplus since the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
No obesity pandemic. In the 70s it started because they started big companies, big corporations told the government that grains and carbs
Mm-hmm.
need to make up the base of the plate, the food pyramid. Naki and I are old enough to remember when the food pyramid came out, and they told us how to eat, right? But
Yeah.
and we believe that, like that's how we're supposed to eat. And that's when, and then snacking became huge. And that's when obesity blew up. It wasn't before then. It was when the government started telling us how to eat. And for people that say, "Oh, that puts too much credence into we believe what the government says, we don't believe what the government says." The only reason people stop smoking is because the government finally said, "Oh yeah, it does cause cancer. Yeah, you know what? It does." Then
Yeah.
people stop smoking. You know what I mean? But the whole that's all, and there's the capitalism piece in play. Like, I believe capitalism in some of its forms is good for society, but when capitalism is able to take over, commandeer the government, and have the government say, "Look, you need to say that this is what, and fats are bad." Now we find out, holy cow, fats, good fats, avocado, salmon,
Yeah.
omegas, those are actually good for you. For a long time, we were told all fats are bad.
Yeah.
All that stuff is bad. Um, but that, and those are blaming the victim is just something that this country does really well. We
Yeah.
we blame the victim often, and you're right. COVID was a good example. Well, you know, obesity rates. Well,
Hmm.
there's it's easy to blame a group of people. We blamed. I remember in the '80s, we blamed Japanese people for stealing the car industry. Right? It wasn't our lack of efficiencies or our cars weren't as good. It was blame Japanese people. Blame a group of people, and our jobs are going away. We blame the Mexicans for coming across the border, like they're killing our labor market. That's something that I think that if we're going to address hate as a society, it's got to get over like finding a group of people to blame things on, because we
Right.
do that way too often.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And again, if you allow other groups to be labeled, you are allowing your group to be labeled. It should be unacceptable for any at least the public officials to get up on a podium or behind a mic and say, well, it's these group of people, that's the reason why there's corruption here. But when you follow the money, it's never the people they blame.
Right.
They always look like the people who's talking. And
Yeah.
that's the deal of it all. Is the people that own these businesses that go overseas, or who only accept certain demographics to work for them because they think little of them. You know what I'm saying? You'll even see like fishing industries will go and go back home to the islands and pick out our young people to put on boats. And it's a dangerous job. Sometimes they won't compensate them, or they'll overwork them and things like that. Um, but when it comes to blaming a group of people, then you then have to have responsibility in that too. Even when it comes to white folks, like I have to work through my issues with white supremacy and white people, but like the truth of the matter is we have to work together. We cannot
Right.
ostracize one group of people out of our country and then pretend that we're going to do life without them. No, everybody brings strengths and everyone has weaknesses. But the beauty of the South Pacific is that we do have a strong collectivistic personality or tradition. Like we do think of others before ourselves. And America is just so individualized that when it came time, like for COVID, for everyone to have the responsibility to wear masks, people start talking about their individual rights, but not public health. That was the craziest thing I saw. It was just like, hey, other countries locked down immediately, got rid
Right.
of COVID because they were just so, adamant about, hey, I got to protect my family members, I got to protect my community. But we don't have that sense. We have in America, it's like a buffet. We got everything for everybody. If you just want to eat off of this tray, then you can. But I wish we could move away from that and
Yeah.
really band together, because as a people we would be stronger. But we just keep experiencing these things and blaming each other instead of getting together and resolving some of these issues.
Right.
For example, I think it was in France, they were trying to raise the age of retirement, and the people came out in droves and started fights with the police. Like they were saying, no, this is important to us. We don't want to work ourselves to death. That's our money. We're not doing that. But we can't get together like that. We have these little groups here and there getting together on separate issues and things like that. But my
That
hope is
discussion. that discussion is going to happen right
Yeah.
here in this country next
My,
year.
yeah.
It will come up. The age of retirement. Uh,
Hmm.
we're going to hear that, hey, we live longer now and
Oh,
science is
hell
better,
no.
and we'll hear that discussion here. But I think that one of the things I would talk to the viewers would be, you know, this point of making America always needs a boogeyman, right? They're going to need a boogeyman, and they're going to make it communism, or they're going to make it terrorism, or they're going to, boil it down and make it smaller, make it a group of people. We as minorities in power, right? And it doesn't have to be a number thing; it's a power thing.
Hmm.
We have to see the majority, white people in particular, as an ally, right? Because we've it's nothing's going to change until they get on board to change things, right? So, like um, the Equal Rights Act, right? That happened because, and this is something to go out to people too. African Americans, Black people mobilized the majority of the country to move for equal rights. They couldn't have done it on their own if they didn't have allies to it, right? So, and my point with that, 2 points with that is where African American, where Black people go, when they move the needle, all of us go with it, right? All of
Hmm.
us, Latin, Asian, Pacific Islanders, that we go as they go. So support your Black, your Latinx, your brothers and sisters in activism. But two, like engaging white people to help the change is needed. So it's not like all white people are the boogeyman. You know what I mean? Like that's an American thought that all of these people are bad or all are good. We need allies to really move the needle and change things for us. So to alienate all of any group is really that's a colonial mind thought. That's a way of thinking that we may have learned because of the parent culture.
Yeah, and I think looking to white people to fix certain things is giving back their responsibility of their mess.
Mm.
If me, you, and Naki are sitting in a room and I push over a glass of milk, I do not expect Carl and Naki to clean it up. I clean up that. So a lot of what we experience, and I hate using majority and minority because the fact of the matter is our populations are way bigger than white population, or it's starting to get there, right? But I a lot of what we experience in our groups is just our reaction
Right.
to what they do. It is not something we've manifested. We're reacting to them being a certain way. And so when we rope in white people in terms of racial reconciliation and community movements and things like that, we really have to say, hey, you've created these systems. It is your job to break down and fix these systems. It's not ours. We're reacting to the system you guys built. We didn't build this. We didn't cause this. But we can work together to help dismantle it. But the ownership has to be with them, because the fact of the matter is if they don't move, we don't move anywhere. The reason why those protests for BLM was so big is because it was the most diverse protest I've ever seen. You had people from top to bottom just sitting on in their stores or on the street and just holding signs, but they weren't just black people.
Right.
So I think that's going to be our solution. If we're going to talk about one love in the South Pacific, then let's prove it true. Let's make it real. And one love means, like, even if it's something that doesn't affect you immediately, be out there, support. And when it comes your time, just like the Fa Love Love, just like my dad giving the $200 to his cousin's dog walker's babysitter, when it
Right.
comes for your turn, when it comes for your time to experience something, look at the love that will be poured into you because of the support you put out there. And that's how you
We
stop
need
it.
allies. We need allies,
Yes.
and we're all one love, all those kind of things. And to put it the way that Dacia put it earlier, starts in the home, right? You got to be able to call things out as a person that might be the older person being called out. I have to be accepting of those conversations. Like when somebody younger challenges me on something, I have to be, my role is to hear it, right? And not play the hey, I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? So
Watch
if
your
you're
mouth.
younger, your role is to challenge it. If you're older, your role is to listen and hear it,
Right.
and then we'll move beyond into our communities and into the ally world. But I want to give Dacia our final thoughts. We are taking up a whole bunch of your time. We appreciate your time, but I've always said, I've said this. You know, we were kind of kicking around in the pre-show. Do we want to run this tonight? Do we want to? But I always learn. You know, at least one thing, one big thing. I've learned a whole bunch, both in the pre-show and on the show with you tonight. So I will be quiet. Let Naki take us the rest of the way home and give Dacia our final thoughts, and then Naki, you can have it from there.
Him being quiet. Whoa. I'm like, you know. Um, I always learn a lot. I think that's why you're one of my favorite, if not my favorite. Is because I learn a lot from you. And the what I've learned that, and this is also why sometimes I'm like, should I have said something? Is it's not my responsibility to teach you my heritage, my how you're going to learn from me. It's not my responsibility. Only if you offend me personally and you don't know me, then okay, we might have a fight. But that I got from you, and I take it where I go. Is this is not my I'm not your teacher. It's not my responsibility. And
Mhm.
I get sometimes you don't have enough experience to, yeah, people are always trying to connect in the way that they know how to, not the way that I want you to connect. You're trying to connect the way you know how to. So is it my responsibility to I'm not. It's not. Sometimes it's not, and if you offend me and you come for my kids, then we'll have a conversation. I'm gonna try not to snap at you. It just depends on where I'm at and what's going on and what is happening at that time. But is not my responsibility. I'm gonna ask you to go learn, and I'm gonna do that. Well, why did you say that? Well, what made you say Samoa, or whatever the person is saying? Well, what made you say that? Why did you think that was appropriate to say to me at this time in this space? I'll do that. But for me, I'm not going to teach you my heritage.
Mhm.
I'm not going to teach you why. If you're coming at it, really, it depends on the situation, what's going on at the time, and if you're coming at me wrong, then we'll have a conversation. Otherwise, I'm old, and it ain't my job to teach you. That's just it. Just depends on how you come at me. Then we'll have a conversation. But it's just sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes it's not worth it, and I know your mind is not open to take have this conversation with me. And so, am I gonna waste my time? Because whatever I say to you at that time, you're not, you know who is open to have a conversation with you and who is not. So sometimes it's just not worth it. But I will have sometimes you catch me, I will be that person. It just depends, right? It just depends. But I because of this conversation, I will think twice, like, should I talk to her or pull her to the side and say, "Hey," you know what I mean? I could have had that conversation just so that they know better, because the next person you try to do the have you watched Moana? They may they may curse you out. You know what I mean? So maybe just to say a word to the side and not have a full on public attack, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. It just depends. Like I'm so neutral. Like I don't want drama. But if you come at me and my kids, that's what you're gonna get, right? That's what you're gonna get, right? But if I'm at work and you come at me crazy, it ain't worth it for me. It ain't worth it. I still gotta pay my bills. I still gotta pay my mortgage. So you are not worth that to me. You are not worth me losing that. If you're ignorant and we're out and having coffee, we may have a decent conversation. I don't know, but you always make me think like, is this the time? Am I going to teach you? I do that. Am I lazy and may not like sometimes it just ain't worth it. And I'm rambling, but yeah.
No, that's
I,
good.
I'm grateful that you opened my mind. And you've been doing this for like years. You may not know this, but a video that you had done about Samoa and sexual abuse, that was the first time I was introduced to you. And being a person, a survivor of sexual abuse, I appreciated that video, that you had that conversation about Samoans and how we keep quiet. So you've made me think this whole time. So that's why I love you, because you make me think outside of the box, right? At that time, and I think it was like 5, 6, maybe no, it was longer than that that you had made that video.
It's like
How long?
7 years ago, maybe.
7 years ago, right? So it was back then that I started thinking different. Man, she's right. I should be talking about what happened because, but all the time people talk about it, and I've just went way off topic, but all the time people talk about sexual abuse, somebody comes out and says it happened to me. Like,
Yeah.
why? And you said this too. It's somebody we know. It's never a strange. It doesn't look like the boogeyman.
Mm.
It's somebody that we know. So I love you so much because
Mm.
you always make me think. Because I'm in this little bubble. I'm like, oh, maybe not. She's right. You need to speak out. Just because you never know who you're going to talk to or who you're going to reach with your story.
Yeah.
So I love you so much, and thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming to talk to us whenever we ask you. So
I love this place. You kind of are my like parents. Like I just feel like
Oh my
whatever they need, I'm gonna be there.
yeah,
And I'm glad you shared your story because it ties into my last thought in terms of it starts in the home, right?
right,
The hardest place to cause change is in your own four walls because these people raised you. There are certain boundaries that you grew up with. There's certain ceilings and floors that you were given. Hey, this is the limit. This is how you talk to me. This is how you're not going to talk to me. But if you're brave enough to not confront, but if you're brave enough to establish boundaries with your grandmother, your father, your mother, your uncles, then when you go outside of your home and you start spreading this message of activism and getting together and loving on one another, you won't be found out to be a fraud.
right,
And so a diamond goes under a lot of pressure
right.
to get that little nice shiny rock.
Yeah,
I challenge you guys to endure that pressure you have in your home because I promise you when you work on your family, if every one of us worked on our family, when we walked outside of our homes, we would just see a bunch of diamonds laying everywhere. And so it's hard, and it doesn't always have to be confrontation. It could
right,
just be a book like, Mom, I'm reading this book. Dad, oh, you see this poem? Or hey, you guys want to watch a movie with me? It doesn't always have to be this whole like kind of like malicious circle of I'm over here and versus you guys over here.
right.
Sometimes it looks like a conversation. Sometimes it looks like a coloring book.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with my niece when we were coloring, and I picked up the brown crayon. She was like, brown. I held the crayon up against her skin, and she realized, oh, I'm brown too.
Yeah.
I said, okay, is brown beautiful? She said, oh yeah, pretty. I'm brown. And I'm like, that's it.
That's all it takes.
Sometimes a conversation is holding up a crayon to your niece and telling it how beautiful it is. It's the little acts of kindness, little acts of resistance that make a big difference in people's lives. And when you're consistent, oh, what a beautiful thing it is when you're consistent. Because you may not be changing the world, but you're changing the world you're in. You're
Yes.
changing your family. And for you parents, I do not envy your positions at all, but just know that your child you're raising up a leader. You're raising up a door that people could walk through and be themselves.
Yeah.
I am so blessed to go into groups and allow people to feel comfortable to be themselves and work through the issues they need to work in. And I couldn't have done that if I wasn't raised to be that way and given the space to be that way. So yeah, parents, you're going to hear your kids tell you hey dad, you shouldn't say that anymore, or why
Yeah,
you got to be so mean when you've been like that for 30, 40 years.
right,
But just know that the voice you're listening to is not a voice that's trying to okay you.
right.
It's a voice that's going to teach thousands of people when you're gone. And
Yes.
so I say turn that mic on in your kids and let them speak. And when they get too loud and they get wrong, turn the mic down, give them their lines, and then turn that mic right back up, because we're not going to be here forever. But that legacy of love, that legacy of teaching, and that the way you raise up your home and speak about things, not being in silence and sharing experiences, that's going to last forever. So I say shine bright like a diamond, but you got to endure that pressure first. Get endure that pressure, and I promise you, you will shine.
Yay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and your love and your education that you fill my soul with all the time with everything that you say. I love you so much. Thank you for your
I
time.
love you both. Oh
Thank
my
Thank you,
gosh.
Dacia.
you. Thank
Hi,
you.
Jackie.